Don't worry, guys, you'll fit in fine, our mom said as she dropped us off in front of the school. My younger brother Lucas and I looked at each other with a doubtful look. We waved goodbye. Are you ready? I asked. He nodded, and I draped my arms casually over his shoulder as we walked through the gates of our new school together. Hi, my name is Noah. Don't just watch the video, like it and subscribe to our channel for the best videos. Oh, and don't forget to tap that notification bell. As I sat in my first class, I could not help but notice how clean everything was. Nothing was out of place. All the tables and chairs were perfectly aligned. Even the pencils on the teachers' tables were the same size and in a straight line. I watched as children entered the class, sat quietly, and waited for the teacher. The bell rang and the teacher entered the classroom. She called the roll, introduced me to the class, and proceeded with the day's lesson. For every single question that was asked, all the children raised their hands in an orderly fashion to answer. Children didn't talk to their friends or laugh while the teacher was talking. This happened in every single class. Even walking through the halls and going from class to class, the students made lines and the hallway was quiet. Way too quiet for my liking. I felt as though I was in a horror movie, and at any point in time, something would jump out and snatch me away. I was surprised by two things when I walked into the cafeteria. Number one, that the kids weren't actually talking to each other. And number two, there weren't any cafeteria attendants. Each student was waiting patiently in line and dished out their own portions. I spotted my brother sitting at a table alone. I sat in the chair next to him and pulled out the sandwich that I brought from home. Have you noticed anything freakishly weird about this school? I asked as I bit into my sandwich. Other than how clean and quiet everything is? Yeah, it's pretty weird, replied Lucas. As I observed the other students, I realized that Lucas and I were the only ones eating lunch that we brought from home. The school said that lunches were paid for in the school fee. However, my brother and I walked in with lunch just in case we didn't like the meals that the school offered. The bell rang an hour later. I told Lucas I would meet him in front of the school when the last bell rang. I wished him luck in his classes for the rest of the afternoon, and I headed to class. When we arrived home, my mother was in the kitchen cooking. Mom, who told you about that school? It's really weird, I said as I sat by the kitchen table. Oh, you know Mrs. Blackman, the plump woman that I work with. Well, she enrolled her son here earlier this year, and she said she was really impressed by the change in his behavior. And the school has no behavioral problems either, which is a plus. My brother and I weren't badly behaved, but my brother was teased in his last school, so my mother moved us. I just want you boys to have a great experience at school and to be able to learn and explore without the fear of being teased and harassed by other students. And it wouldn't hurt if Lucas learned how to pick up after himself once in a while, or cleaned his room. Now that would be a miracle, I laughed. Even though I missed my old friends, I decided to give the new school a chance for Lucas's sake. I tried to make friends, but I felt as though the conversations were not natural. It felt like speaking to a robot with a memory chip that had pre-answered responses. One thing that amazed me at this school was the fact that the only adults we ever saw were teachers. There were no janitors, groundskeepers, or even cafeteria attendants. I once made a joke about where detention was held in this perfect school, and the student looked at me with a blank expression. The first month, I just went through the phases of going to school, following the rules and doing what was required of me at school. Then, one Friday, I was ill, and I stayed home. I noticed that Lucas left his lunch at home. I called Mom and told her, but she said that Lucas would be okay since he could get lunch at school. I did not trust the lunch from the cafeteria, but my mom just thought I was being dramatic. As soon as Lucas returned from school, I asked him how his day was. He said he had a great day, and he told me how much he enjoyed the lunch at school. While he was talking with me, I watched as he packed away his book bag and his shoes. Lucas had never done this before, when he would usually just drop it anywhere and Mom and I would trip over them. Are you feeling okay? Since when are you packing away your bag and shoes? Are you feeling okay? I joked. I'm fine, Lucas laughed. Suddenly, his facial expression changed. He had a strange look in his eye for a moment, then it disappeared as quickly as it appeared. I call dibs on the first controller, Lucas shouted as he shoved past me and rushed to the television. Every Friday after school, Lucas and I would play video games till Mom came home. Hey boys, I'm home. My mother looked around the living room and raised her eyebrows. She walked over and placed her hand on Lucas' forehead and checked his temperature. Are you okay? I was expecting to trip over your bag and shoes. I packed them away like I'm supposed to, Mom. There was that look again in Lucas' eyes. Then it was gone. Can I eat lunch in the cafeteria from now on? It was really good. Sure, no problem, Lucas. Will you be taking lunch from the cafeteria as well? Mom looked at me and I shook my head. "No, I'm good. I'll pass." As the weekend lingered on, not once did Lucas clean up after himself. It made me think that I was just overreacting about him packing away his things on Friday. But the following week, my concerns returned as Mom and I noticed little changes about Lucas. He no longer slept in. As soon as he returned home, he began his homework and he no longer wanted to play video games. While my mother was amazed and happy about Lucas' new change, I saw my brother's personality being stripped right before my eyes. The once happy 11-year-old that I was proud to call my brother now appeared robotic and emotionless. It's not that he didn't smile or laugh, but when he did, it seemed hollow and stiff. I knew that it had to do with the food that the cafeteria was serving its students, and if I wanted to save my brother, I had to find out what they were putting in the food and destroy it. Where the food came from and how it got into the cafeteria remained a mystery, especially since there were no cafeteria attendants. The cafeteria doors were kept locked until lunchtime. I assumed that it had an automatic timer on the lock since we never saw anyone unlock the doors, ever. Mom, don't you think it's strange that Lucas' behavior changed once he started eating the food from the cafeteria? Not this again, Noah. Nothing is wrong with the food in the cafeteria. If something was wrong, other parents would have spoken up about it by now. So, do you want pizza or Chinese for dinner? That was another thing that was a mystery to me. I couldn't understand why parents couldn't see the changes in their children's behavior. Is it that good grades and a clean room is all they really want? I knew that I had to figure this out on my own. I decided in the perfect school, I needed to be the black sheep. If I went against the rules, then maybe I would be able to find out more about the school. Not only did I find what I was looking for, but I got way more than I bargained for. The next day, I started with something minor. I placed my legs on my table while the teacher was talking. Then in the next class, I called my cousin and talked with him on the phone the entire class. In science class, I threw the dead frogs on my classmates, and during lunch, I pulled the fire alarm. Even though classes were suspended for the day, not one teacher commented about my behavior. I didn't know what to make of it. I figured since they didn't speak to me about it, for sure they called my mom and spoke to her. I expected my mother to come home and give me a lecture about my behavior at school. But when she walked through the front door, she said nothing. "Hey, Mom," I said casually. "Did the school call you today?" "Noah Nicholas Caesar." My mother placed her hands on her hips. "Did something happen at school that I should know about?" "No," I lied. "It's just that my homeroom teacher said that I may make the honor roll list. I just thought that she called you to confirm it." "Oh, well, that's great. No one from the school called, but I'll let you know if they do." The next day, I decided to take it up a notch. I spray painted the lockers in the hallway. "School sucks." I swore at a teacher, threw over tables and chairs in the classroom, and picked fights with other boys in my class the entire day. By the end of the day, I was disappointed when no teacher noticed my behavior, and I wasn't called to the principal's office. If I was in my old school, I would have been suspended by now. I lay in my bed that night and thought about calling it quits. I wasn't prepared for the bizarre situation that happened the following day. Just like every morning when I got to school, I went to class. I kept thinking that there was nothing else that happened at the school that would surprise me. But today, once again, here I was. When the bell rang, I was still the only person sitting in class. I found it odd and wondered if we were assigned a different classroom today, but I didn't get the memo. I got up and I almost reached the door when I heard a click. The door was locked. I turned the knob frantically and tugged on the door. I heard a soft hissing sound and my eyes and throat began to burn. I coughed hysterically and tried to cover my eyes. I began to feel sleepy. I sank to the floor and blacked out. I opened my eyes groggily and expected to be tied to a chair in a dungeon on some far-off island. But as I looked around, I realized that I was lying on a sofa in what looked like an office. "Nice of you to join me, Mr. Caesar." A slim woman with her black hair and a tight bun and glasses looked at me sternly. "My name is Principal Rothwell. Would you like some water before we begin?" I declined as I sat up slowly. "I've been monitoring your behavior, and it appears that you are seeking an audience. Now, Mr. Caesar, you have an audience. How can I be of assistance? You have my full attention." I took a deep breath. This was my chance to find out the truth about this perfect school. "I know that you're controlling the students by putting some sort of chemical in the food in the cafeteria," I said. "There is no way teenagers will act like that on their own. Don't you have any kind of conscience about what you're doing and the long-term effects this would have on them? I will find out how you're controlling them. even if it's the last thing that I do. I expected her to get upset, angry, or even laugh devilishly, but she kept calm and sat next to me. She spoke softly and calmly. In my school population, I have parents who are lawyers, senators, doctors, politicians, and psychiatrists. Do you really expect me to take on the ramblings of a 14-year-old? Parents want children who listen, follow instructions, get A's, and don't cause them trouble. I'm giving parents what they want. As long as I have a market, I will never go out of business. Now, you can either go back to class and be well behaved, or I can plant something in your brother's locker that will make him be in juvenile detention for a few years. I have the means and money to get it done. You will not come into my school and disrupt it. Do I make myself clear? Reluctantly, I nodded. Good. Now that we have that out of the way, do have a great day, Mr. Caesar. I couldn't allow Principal Rothwell to get away with what she was doing. I just needed to be smart about this. Lucas and the other students deserved to live a life where they were in charge of their own choices and not live like mindless puppets. When my mother got home from work that afternoon, she called Lucas and me and we sat in the living room. So, I got a call from the school today, Mom said, looking between Lucas and me. I felt my heart rate increase and the palms of my hands became sweaty. Did Principal Rothwell call my mom about what happened today? I cleared my throat. So what did the school say? Principal Rothwell called. Lucas and I looked nervously at each other. It looks as though Lucas made the honor roll in his class. Mom gave Lucas a hug and I told him congratulations as I ruffled his hair playfully. I was proud of my brother, but I just wished that he was back to his old self. This celebration deserves cake, my mom shouted. Lucas went to the kitchen and returned with slices of cake on a plate. The cake was delicious. This is the best cake I have ever had. Where did you get this cake? I asked. I didn't purchase any cake, but you're right, it does taste amazing. I looked at Lucas. Where did you get this cake from? I was almost afraid to hear the answer. Oh, Principal Rothwell gave me the extra cake from the cafeteria today. My heart plummeted.
Ethan and Sarah walked past me, laughing and giggling to themselves. I could feel my blood boiling inside. What was he doing with her? He should be with me. Sarah had never liked me, and the feeling was mutual. I guess you could say we were arch enemies. That's why I hated the fact that she was dating Ethan. Everyone knew that I had always liked Ethan. We had known each other since we were 5 years old, but we had never dated. When Ethan started going out with Sarah, she couldn't wait to let me know. Did you hear, Belinda? Me and Ethan are official, she said. I knew she was gloating. I didn't care what it was going to take. I had to find a way to steal him from her. But before I go on, make sure you like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any more crazy stories. I spent all the next weekend trying to come up with a plan to get Ethan for myself. I knew that he wouldn't just dump Sarah. It was obvious they were madly in love. It did cross my mind that I could kidnap Sarah, but then I realized that that would be a pretty crazy thing to do. Then it came to me. I had always been a bit of a computer whiz kid. Maybe I could use my computer skills to hack into the school computer system and change Ethan's grades. I knew that Ethan hadn't done very well in his end-of-year exams. I felt sure that if I changed all his grades to A's, then he would want to date me. After school the next day, I saw Ethan walking home alone. I ran to catch up with him. Hi, Ethan, I said. Oh, hi, Belinda, replied Ethan. Hey, do you want to know a way to get straight A's this year? I asked him. I wish. My parents are going to be so mad when they see my end-of-year report. The highest grade I got was a D. What if I told you I can find a way to change all your grades to an A? Really? You'd do that for me? Of course I will. But there is one condition. What's that? You start dating me. But I already have a girlfriend. I told him that he would have to dump Sarah if he didn't want to get into trouble with his parents. At first, Ethan was hesitant. I could tell at that moment that he really liked Sarah. But then I could see his mind working when he realized how his parents might react when they found out he got D's in his exams. And then he nodded at me, even if it was reluctantly. So that's what he did. Ethan told Sarah they were over, and he started dating me. The first time Sarah saw us together wasn't very pleasant. Ethan, what are you doing with Belinda? Sarah asked. Ethan looked like he didn't know what to say, so I spoke instead. We're dating now. I said smugly. I can't believe it, Sarah cried. Ethan, what happened to us? We were perfect for each other. Then she turned to me. What did you do to get him from me? I know you must have meddled somehow. I bet you made up some lie about me, didn't you? Come on, Ethan, I said, pulling him with me. She's crazy. Let's not waste any more of our time on her. At first, things went really well with Ethan. I felt really happy he was my boyfriend. But looking back, I think that was mainly because I was just glad that I got one over on Sarah. Soon, the novelty of dating him began to wear off. He wasn't really my type, to be honest. Actually, he was quite boring. All he ever wanted to do was sit at home playing computer games, week in, week out. I was the complete opposite of him. I hated staying at home, and I hated playing computer games. I wanted him to take me to the movies or to a nice restaurant. But whenever I suggested we do something, he always had some reason for not being able to go. Finally, after another boring evening sitting in his house, I decided I was going to end it with him. I'm sorry, Ethan, it's just not working out. Ethan was fine about it. Let's just agree to be friends, he said. Of course, I said. Oh, but make sure you don't tell anyone that I changed your grades, or I will change them back again. But this time, I will make them worse than before. I won't tell anyone, I promise. The next time I saw a boy I liked, I didn't bother wasting my time flirting with him. I just got straight to the point. I offered to change his grades if he dated me, but I soon got bored with him and moved on to the next boy. I dated boy after boy. None of them lasted very long though. It was too easy to just get another boy when I got bored. I could get any boy I wanted. One thing did surprise me though. Ethan ended up getting back with Sarah. When I first found out they were dating, I started panicking. What if he tells Sarah what I've done for him? I thought. I decided I would have to speak to him. The first chance I got, I went up to him and whispered in his ears, "Don't forget your promise, or you're going to get a fail in every subject." "Don't worry, I haven't told anyone," he said. "Your secret is safe with me." After our conversation, I stopped worrying about Ethan, which is why it came as a big shock when I bumped into Sarah at school the next day. "I know what you did," she said. "I know that you've been changing all the boys' grades so that they will date you." My heart sank. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "I can't believe Ethan told you," I said. "He promised me he wouldn't say anything." "What?" Sarah said. "No, it wasn't Ethan that told me." "Well, if it wasn't him, who was it then?" "It was Mrs. Walker, the school secretary." "Yup. Why would she tell you?" "Because she's my auntie." I listened in shock as Sarah told me that her auntie had noticed that some of the boys' grades were a lot higher than she remembered them getting. She had gone to the principal and told him what she had found. The principal searched the computer history to see who had accessed the system. He then traced the IP address and found out that it had come from a computer located at my home address. "Once I knew you had changed the grades, I put 2 and 2 together and realized how you had got Ethan and all the other boys to date you," she said. "I couldn't believe that I had been caught. Oh my God, the principal is going to tell my parents and I'll probably get expelled." I thought, they're going to be so angry with me. I knew there was nothing else for it. I was going to have to find a way to blackmail the principal, so he didn't tell my parents what I had done. When I got home, I went straight to my room and switched on my computer. I began to investigate the principal. I was hoping I might find an embarrassing photo or something like that. The last thing I imagined I would find was that he was actually a wanted criminal. It was all there in black and white. He had escaped from prison and was on the run. The FBI had been looking for him for almost 5 years. I had no idea how he had managed to evade them for so long, but this was just what I needed. When the bell rang at the end of school the next day, I waited around until everyone else had left the school building. I went straight to the principal's office and knocked on the door loudly. "Come in," said the principal. I walked into his office and sat down at his desk. He looked a bit shocked to see me. He probably thought that I was there to ask for forgiveness. But he was wrong. "I know. You're an escaped prisoner," I told him. His face turned white. "You better not tell anyone what I've done, or I will call the FBI and tell them where you are," I said. "Okay, you win," he said. "I won't tell anyone." I felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. Finally, I could relax again. Everything was going to be okay. I was just about to leave his office when suddenly the door burst open and the room was filled with FBI agents. "Put your hands in the air," one officer shouted. The principal did as they said. They put handcuffs on him and let him out of the school building. As he went out, he turned to me and said, "This is all your fault, Belinda. You're going to regret what you've done to me." I was so confused. I hadn't told the FBI yet. Why were they here? I looked at Mrs. Walker standing in the doorway. "What just happened?" I asked her. "I overheard you blackmailing the principal," she said. "I called the FBI and told them everything." "What? Why would you do that? My life is going to be ruined now because of you," I screamed at her. We found out at school that the principal had been taken back to prison. Mrs. Walker ended up calling my parents and telling them everything that I had done. "We're so disappointed in you, Belinda," said my dad when he came to pick me up. "You're grounded for a month." When I went back to school, no one would speak to me. Sarah had told everyone that I had been changing grades and that I had tried to blackmail the school principal. It was a pretty miserable time for me. It was towards the end of term, and I was walking home from school all alone. Nobody wanted to walk with me anymore. Suddenly, I felt a strange sensation. I was sure someone was following me. I turned around, but I couldn't see anyone at all. I carried on walking and was almost home when I felt someone grab me from behind. I couldn't see who it was. They put their hands over my mouth and blindfolded me. The next thing I knew, I was being pushed into a car. I tried to scream, but the hand over my mouth just stifled the sound. We drove for about 10 minutes and then the car stopped. Someone took me out of the car and led me into a building. Someone took off the blindfold. The glare from the light blinded me for a few seconds, but eventually everything came into focus. 2 men were standing in front of me. "What do you want with me?" I cried. "Please, don't hurt me." "Do you remember what you did to your school principal?" one of the men asked. I felt the fear rising up inside me. I remember the principal's words as the police were taking him away. "I'm sorry," I said. "I wasn't going to tell the FBI. It was all a mistake." "Well, it's a mistake that's going to cost you a lot," the other man said. "Now you just sit here and don't make a sound. We will be back in an hour." They left the room and I heard the sound of the key in the door. I had no idea what they were going to do with me, but I knew that I had to try to find a way out of there. Luckily, they hadn't tied me up. I looked around the room, but the only way out was through the locked door. It was no good. There was nothing I could do. I had no choice but to just sit there and wait for them to come back. It wasn't long before I heard the sound of the key turning in the door. I took a deep breath. This was my only chance. When the door opened, I was going to try and make an escape. I stood up, but when the door opened, it wasn't the 2 men standing there. It was Ethan. "Ethan, what are you doing here?" I asked. "I've come to save you," he said. "Quick, follow me." I didn't wait around a second longer. I ran out the door and followed Ethan outside. We ran down the street as fast as we could. We had to get away before the 2 men came back. Eventually, we were out of breath and had to stop running. Then we hid in a shop doorway. "How did you know where to find me?" I asked Ethan. "I was walking behind you on the way home from school, and I saw the men bundling you into the car," he said. "So I followed them and waited outside the building. When I saw them leave, I went inside the building. I couldn't believe they had left the key in the door." "You've saved my life, Ethan," I said. "What can I do to repay you?" "There is one thing I would like." "Anything, anything." "I want you and Sarah to put everything behind you. I want you two to become friends." The thought of being friends with my arch enemy was disgusting to me. But I really didn't have a choice, did I? So now, Sarah and I are doing our best to become friends. For Ethan's sake.
"Vaughn, wake up," Dad said as he shook me awake. I opened my eyes and tried to focus on the watch on my hand. It was 5 a.m. Why was Dad waking me up at this hour? "What is it?" I asked, annoyed. I sat up and observed the room. Next to my father and older sister, Desiree, were 2 men. "What's going on, Dad, and who are these people?" "Listen, Vaughn, I know things haven't been going right since the death of your mother, but if you continue going down this path, you'll end up in jail or dead. You know I wouldn't do anything to hurt you, but this needs to be done." "Oh, please, Dad, save me the 'this is going to hurt you more than it does me' speech." "If you want me to go, I'll just go," I said as I stood up. Dad placed his hand over his face and cried as Desiree tried to comfort him. The strangers placed a black pillowcase over my head and dragged me from the house, as though I was on the most wanted list, and dumped me into a vehicle. If my dad didn't want me, then I didn't want him. "Hi, my name is Vaughn. Have you liked and subscribed to our channel yet? And what about that notification bell? Have you tapped it yet? If you haven't, what are you waiting for? Let's get it done today. A few years ago, my mother passed away and my life hasn't been the same since. My mother understood me while all my dad did was criticize me. I tried not to be home when he was. I started skipping school, hanging out with the wrong crowd, ran away for about 2 weeks. I even let some of my friends come over while dad wasn't at home. They stole some cash and jewelry, including the watch mom gave him for their 15th wedding anniversary. After a long, bumpy drive, we came to a halt. I heard the door open and a man pulled the pillowcase from my head. "Why, hello, son. Nice of you to join us. Welcome to St. Augustine's School for Troubled Boys. My name is Sean Chase and I'm the director of the school. I hope that your stay with us is a pleasant one." I looked around. We were no longer in civilized territory and the dirt road was proof of that. I looked around and saw about 15 boys working in the field. Mr. Chase shouted, "Hey boys, why don't you come and welcome the new kid?" The movement of the boys seemed slow and unsteady as they made their way towards me. Their eyes looked sunken, and under them were heavy and dark bags. Their clothing was soiled and holed. Some boys wore white while others wore red. They each shook my hand, some more friendly than others, before returning to their tasks. Mr. Chase called out to a staff member, "Let's get him settled and clothed so he can start the day." I soon fell into the grueling routine at the school. The day usually starts at 5 a.m. and all the boys would gather at the dining hall for breakfast. After cleaning up, classes commenced at 7 a.m. Then, the part of the day that the boys dreaded, the exercises. At the back of the school was a steep hill that was fenced. They nicknamed the hill El Diablo. Every morning, each student was given a 20-pound sack of rice that they had to make 15 laps with up and down the hill. After which we had numerous exercises that followed, such as long runs, charging up and down the hill holding a truck tire, scissor kicks, push-ups, wall sits until our legs burned or lungs were on fire. The staff at the school enjoyed taunting and jeering at us. One time when I fell during one of the long runs, Mr. Quentin, a member of staff, encouraged the other boys to help me. They held my legs and dragged me to the finish line and didn't stop no matter how much I yelled at them to do so. At night, when the boys were alone, they spoke about the horror that happened within the walls of the school. Boys who tried to run away were locked up in the closet and sometimes shackled and chained. I thought they were making it up until I saw the marks on Antonio's wrists and ankles. Every day you could earn as much as 3 points. You needed 60 points to call home. Other boys who were favored by the staff were allowed visits home, rental of movies, and even play sports on the field. Parents were not allowed to visit without permission. The ones who get to go home, why don't they tell their parents what's really going on here? I asked. Because Mr. Chase goes with them to visit their families since it's just an afternoon pass. While at the school, I became friends with one boy named Barry. He was a bit on the chubby side and came in around the same time that I did. Tonight, Barry and I, with a few others, had kitchen duty. I'm exhausted. I can't wait to go to bed, I said to Barry as we placed the dirty dishes in the sink. I don't understand why Mr. Chase feels the need to train us as though we were gladiators. All we do is exercise and work. As we were heading back to the dining hall, I saw a woman turn the corner. I felt my jaw drop. "Mom?" I ran to meet her, but when I got to the corner and looked down the corridor, nobody was there. I walked back to the dining hall, confused. "What was that about?" Barry asked. "I thought I saw my mom." "But isn't your mom gone?" Barry asked hesitantly. "I know, but the person looked just like her." "I think you're hallucinating, bro. You were just tired and overworked. You can't bring the dead back to life. You'll feel better in the morning after you get a good night's sleep." The next day, I did not feel better. I kept looking over my shoulder to see if I could get a glimpse of the woman again, but she was never there. Even though I felt as though someone was always staring at me. Maybe it was my mom letting me know that she was with me. After 4 weeks, I could hardly keep my eyes open during the day, and the older, bigger boys took advantage of the weaker ones. Sometimes they stole our meals and would jump us any chance they got. Staff turned a blind eye, and Mr. Chase said that boys will be boys. I wanted my freedom back, and I didn't care what I needed to do to get it. Mr. Chase took a few of us to help clear some land, put up a fence, and restore an old wooden house. After 3 weeks, it was finally time to head back to the school. As we were piling into the van, I noticed Mr. Chase's phone on the seat. I quickly picked it up and stuffed it in my boot. The drive back to camp was the longest drive I ever had. My palm was sweaty and my heart felt like a terrified bird trying to get out of its cage. I knew that I had to stay calm or I would be caught. I breathed a sigh of relief as we arrived at school. Mr. Chase told us to pack away the tools back in the shed. When everyone was out of the shed, I turned off the phone and slipped it between two floorboards. During dinner, Mr. Chase realized his phone was missing. That's when things took a turn for the worse at the school. Every room was searched. Every boy was taken into a room one by one and searched by Mr. Chase. The 20 boys who went with Mr. Chase to restore the house were singled out and placed in red t-shirts. I know that one of you knows who the culprit is. This school will not rest until my phone is found, Mr. Chase snarled. Nights were no longer for sleeping. We did drills at night as well as day, even in the rain. A few of the boys got ill, but Mr. Chase continued to push us. Food was now rationed, and with the lack of sleep and dehydration, boys were dropping like flies. I'm sick of this, Victor said as he threw his plate against the wall. Whoever took Mr. Chase's phone needs to return it. We know it was one of you punks who went to restore the house. Which one of you is it? Asked James. It has to be Vaughn. He was the last person in the truck, Antonio added. Why would I want a phone? Who am I gonna call? My father who dumped me in this hellhole? No thank you, I shouted angrily. The fight broke out in the dining hall. All the boys were shackled and cuffed that night. During the night, Mr. Chase called us to his office one by one. Vaughn, if you know who stole my phone, you should come clean. Mr. Chase, I don't know who stole your phone. I glared at him squarely. Are you sure? Because a few of the boys think that you stole the phone. Without hesitation, I responded. And what would I do with a phone? Who would I be calling? I haven't even written so much as a letter to my family since I got to this place. It was true. I had not written a letter, nor did I tell anyone that I missed home. But it wasn't because I didn't want to write, I just didn't know what to say. I sighed heavily. I know I should not be saying this, but I think it's Barry. Mr. Chase and I finished the conversation and I was released. After the interviews, Mr. Chase said he knew who stole the phone, but until he had his phone in his hand, the punishment went on. The next day, while the other boys and I were working the field and doing exercises, the staff made Barry sit and watch. Barry was also given the best meals while we were given beans and rice. The days following, I noticed Barry with black and blue eyes, but wasn't about to confess to what I did. I wanted to get out, and if it meant throwing somebody under the bus, then so be it. One night after ensuring everyone was asleep, I snuck out to the tool shed. I squeezed my hand between the floorboards and used my fingers to grab the phone. I dusted it off and prayed that it still had some battery life. 10% was enough to make a call to the police to let them know what was really going on here. When I spun around to leave the shed, Barry stood guarding the door. So it really was you all this time. I spent 2 weeks getting the wind knocked out of me because of you. I thought we were friends. He slowly walked towards me. I had to do what I had to do, Barry. I didn't come here to make friends. Move. When he refused, I shoved him and he stumbled backwards and landed among the shovels and wheelbarrows that lined the wall. I burst out of the shed and headed for the fence. A few seconds later, I heard Barry alerting everyone. I scaled the fence and ran down the dirt road. I called the police and told them that I was being held hostage at the school and I just escaped. The police asked me for my location and I told them that I was currently running along the road that led to the school. They told me to stay where I was, but how could I? I knew the longer I kept the phone, the easier it was for Mr. Chase to track me. I decided to make one more call. Hi, Dad. Vaughn? Look, I don't have much time, but I wanted to tell you that I'm sorry. The phone died. Damn it. I threw the phone into the trees that lined the road. I heard trucks approaching and shouts of familiar voices. I immediately darted into the trees. I looked back and noticed flashlights bobbing towards me. I prayed the police would find me before they did. From the forest, I heard sirens and I ran towards them. I began to feel lightheaded, but I needed to stay alert. I reached the dirt road, but I was too late. The police car swooshed past. I tried running and waving behind the car, but they were too far ahead. Someone grabbed my arm. You little thief! I can't wait to get back to the school to make an example out of you, Mr. Chase hissed. A few seconds later, a van pulled up and Mr. Chase tried to force me into the van. Suddenly, another vehicle pulled up and the headlights were directly on us. I heard a door open. Okay, Mr. Chase, put your hands on your head and step away from the boy. It couldn't be. The person walked towards us. Mom? I felt myself drop to my knees. Then the world became black. I woke up to the sound of beeping and familiar voices around me. He's up, Desiree shouted excitedly. Hey, Vaughn, you gave us quite a scare there, Dad said, squeezing my shoulder gently. Then my eyes fell upon a face I never thought I would see again at the side of my hospital bed. Hey, baby. Mom leaned over and hugged me tightly. When we finally pulled away, I looked at her. Is this real? Am I dead too? No, baby, you're very much alive, and so am I. But if you were alive all this time, why did you make us believe you were dead? Well, when my last undercover case went south and your dad started getting death threats, all I thought about was the best way to keep the people that I loved safe. When I went to work undercover at the school 3 years ago, I never expected you to be there, Vaughn. I'm so sorry that you had to go through it all, but my hands were tied. So does that mean you and Dad are getting back together? I asked, looking between the both of them hopefully. Well, son, Dad said, let's focus on you getting better first, okay? Mom kept us abreast of everything that was happening at the school. The school is currently under investigation after receiving allegations from the 60 students that stayed at the school. Mr. Chase was charged with child abuse and negligence and was granted $100,000 bail. I testified against Mr. Chase because I can't allow another boy to go through the torment that I went through. That experience changed my life. I am now in a Big Brother program, which helps boys who are slipping through the cracks.